Okay, so today we're going to go over the APA style workshop. We're going to talk about a couple of things, how APA relates to other citation styles you may have used in the past, how we cite sources and why we cite sources, basic formatting requirements of APA, so that's the whole paper, the link between in-text citations and the reference list, and then how to effectively approach and use APA style in a paper. So that's a lot to cover. So we are just going to jump right into it, okay? Okay, so what is APA? APA stands for the American Psychological Association. APA style rules were created by the American Psychological Association, and they can be found in APA manuals. The manual provides guidelines for writing as well as proper documentation of sources. The first APA manual was published in 1952, and APA puts out a new manual every couple of years. We currently follow the 6th edition. Why do we use APA style at Full Sail? You may have used other documentation styles in the past, such as MLA or Chicago or even AP, which is different from APA. In your high school English classes, you probably used MLA. So why do we do it differently at Full Sail? We use APA style at Full Sail because it's the accepted citation style for business, and it accommodates the wide range of disciplines studied here. Students here study multiple fields in the entertainment business, so if you're more likely to see APA in your jobs when you leave Full Sail. So you'll be required to use APA style for every research assignment that requires citation throughout your education here. Every class has at least one assignment that requires library research, so all your course instructors who ask you to cite your sources will expect you to use APA. Because APA is a school-wide approach to citation, makes sense to learn it early and to kind of look at it again and again and again so that it stays fresh in your mind. Okay, why do we cite sources? There are a couple of reasons. When we cite sources, our readers are able to distinguish our own work and our own ideas and information, and then information taken from outside sources. That means that we as writers get credit for our own ideas and give appropriate credit to the ideas of others. Especially when we're talking about creative work, this is really important. It's important that people get the credit that they deserve, and it's important that that your readers and viewers can understand what is coming directly from you. When a paper lacks citations, readers assume that all of the ideas belong to the writer. If ideas in the paper belong to an outside source and haven't been properly cited, this could be considered plagiarism. When we cite sources, we also show that we've taken the time to study and understand the research and documentation process. It also shows that you have knowledge in the field that you're discussing, which can be really important to prove your own credibility. And that kind of brings me to the next point, which is utilizing and citing research allows us to support our own ideas, and again, it makes our arguments more credible. Any information that comes from an outside source needs to be cited. So, what needs to be cited? This includes quotes, paraphrases, summaries, images, audio, video game elements, computer software, and other media. Anything that is not your own ideas need to be cited. So we're going to look at a couple of the different things that you're likely to be citing. We're going to look at quotes first. What is a quote? It's a word-for-word passage from an outside source. You must cite all of your quotes that are used in any paper. Hey guys, double check that you're muted, okay? Okay. If you use a paraphrase, you also have to cite it. So what is a paraphrase? A paraphrase is when you take a fact or idea from an outside source and you put it into your own words. You also have to cite all paraphrases. And then summaries. When you summarize, you put the main idea of a piece of writing into your own words. This is a little different from a paraphrase where you put a specific idea or fact from a piece of writing into your own words. Think about it like this. If you are taking a sentence or two from an article and you are just kind of giving us this idea in your own words, that's a paraphrase. If you are trying to explain to us in a sentence or two what the entire article is about, that's a summary. Okay, what about audio, video, images, and other media? We also have to cite those. There are two different ways to cite media. One citation style is when you discuss media in a paper, and another citation style is when you include media in a presentation. We're going to cover both of those in just a minute. All right, what does not need to be cited? We don't need to cite common knowledge, but obviously the next question is, what is common knowledge? Common knowledge is ideas that are available in a variety of sources and generally accepted facts, such as pollution is bad for the environment or writing is a process. If you're still confused about common knowledge, you can usually determine that something is common knowledge if you can find the same information undocumented in at least 5 credible sources. It's important to note here that if you read an article and you remember a fact from that article, the fact is not considered common knowledge. You still need to cite the article. Something that I like to think about is we are all probably experts in some area. Common knowledge is what the layperson might know. So even though you might know a lot about, say, Beyonce, not everyone does, although that's a terrible example because lots of people know a lot about Beyonce. But if you were going to talk about when Beyonce was born in an article, you would have to tell us where you found that information through citing. All right, other things that don't need to be cited include findings from preliminary experimentation, which is experiments that you conduct yourself, and original audio, video, and images that you have created. One thing to be aware of, though, is if you don't tell us that you created that audio or video or image, sometimes your reader will assume that you've forgotten to cite it. So sometimes it's better to just cite it anyway. And good rule of thumb, when in doubt, it's better to cite using APA than it is to not cite. All right, we're going to talk in this next section about the bare bones of APA style, and we're going to talk about some formatting requirements. The 3 major elements of an APA paper are the title page, the in-text citations, and then your reference list entry. There are other elements that we'll talk about a little bit, but they're not always needed. For instance, the abstract. All right, let's talk about the title page. This is what your title page should look like. I am going to provide, I'm going to exit out of here real fast, you guys, and I'm going to give you a link. It's a YouTube link, and it's a really great video. It will walk you through how to create a title page, and I'm giving you the link because I can explain it all to you, but you probably won't remember when you actually need your title page. 1 second, sorry guys. All right, so in the chat box you can find that link. Okay, I see a question from Alicia, and I can go into this a little bit more, but really quickly, just to reiterate, no, if it's your own graphic that you're using, you don't have to cite it. Again, it's good to mention somewhere in the paper that the graphic that you're using is your own. That just allows everyone to know that you're on the same page, that you haven't forgotten to cite someone else's work. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about the title page. Woo! I would suggest bookmarking that YouTube video just in case you guys haven't. So let's look at the elements of the title page. Every title page needs a header. The words running head followed by a colon, and the title of your paper in all caps should appear flush left on the header, and then the page number should appear flush right in the header, as you can see on this slide. You'll have a different header on your title page than you do on the rest of your document. On the rest of the pages, you'll drop the words running head and the colon and just put the title of the paper in all caps. Centered about halfway down the page, the title of your paper appears on the next line. Then you get your name gets its own line, and then finally the name of your school is the last line. The next thing that would come in an APA paper, if it's required, is an abstract. Usually abstracts are only included with longer research papers, such as thesis papers. When required, the abstract is a brief summary of your paper that immediately follows the title page. If you're not sure if your paper requires an abstract or not, it's best to just ask the instructor, but usually they will let you know in the assignment guidelines if an abstract is required. All right, so the abstract should be double-spaced. It should include the page header with the title of the page in all caps flush left and the page number flush right. The word abstract should be centered. There's no bolding, formatting, italics, underlining, or quotation marks. The abstract should be about 150 to 250 words. This might vary based on the assignment requirements. And then you also may include keywords in your abstract. You don't have to. If you do include keywords, indent as you would if you were starting a new paragraph, then type keywords in italics, and then type your keywords. An abstract, again, is not required for every APA paper. All right, the next thing that we have to talk about is kind of the bulk of what most students have questions about, and that's the in-text citations and the reference list. APA style calls for both. You can't have one without the other, kind of like milk and cookies. In-text citations are used in the body of the document. An in-text citation specifies which source a particular piece of information, like a quote or a paraphrase or a summary, is from. The reference list appears at the end of the document and gives detailed publication information about each source cited in the document. The in-text citation sends your reader to the reference list, and then the reference list allows your reader to find the research you did. If we didn't have in-text citations, we wouldn't be able to identify which ideas in a paper came from an outside source and which ideas came from the author. And if we didn't have the reference list, we wouldn't be able to find the references used throughout the paper. What I like to think about is if you've ever read something and you've thought, man, that claim that they made doesn't sound right to me. If they've quoted their sources, you can follow the source and then from the in-text citation to the reference list, and then you'd be able to actually find the research or the study or the article that this person is quoting from, and you can read it in its original context, which can be really helpful for you if you are trying to find out if someone is being credible or not. So in the next few sections, we'll be going through a lot of specific detail about formatting for in-text citations and reference lists, but don't feel like you have to memorize everything. It's a lot of information, and a little bit later, I'm going to show you some resources where you can find the same info when you need it. And also this will be archived, and you can find it on the Writing Center's Connect page if you ever need a refresher on APA. So we're going to talk about in-text citations first. What should the in-text citation look like? The format for in-text citations vary depending on whether the information cited is a quote, a summary, or a paraphrase. There are two basic formats for in-text citations, and this is true whether it's a paraphrase, a summary, or a quote. The first example is a quote from the Writing Center blog, and we've used the author's last name in the sentence after according to. We've put the date in parentheses immediately after the author's name and the page number in parentheses at the end of the sentence. In this case, we don't have a page number because it's an online blog, so we've used the paragraph number instead. Now, the online blog that we found this from did not number their paragraphs. We did that when we were reading on the blog. When we put the author's name in the sentence like this, it's called a signal phrase, and this is one way that you can use quotes. This is a basic format to use quotes. The second example is another way to create an in-text citation. We did not use a signal phrase in this second example. Instead, we put the author's last name, the year, and the page number or paragraph number at the end of the quote. Either format is acceptable. All right, let's take a little bit closer look at the format for citing quotes. In APA style, there are two formats for citing quotes in text. One format is for quotes under 40 words, and another format is for quotes over 40 words. So this example is an example of a quote that's under 40 words. Quotes that are less than 40 words, like this one, need quotation marks surrounding the actual quote, the author's last name, the year that this was published, and a page or paragraph number. And the period appears at the very end of the citation. Now, if the quote is more than 40 words, it should look like this example. A couple of things to note. We must use a signal phrase. In this case, it's Chapman 2012 states, and then the colon. We don't need quotation marks, but it's a little bit hard to see in this example, but the quote is actually indented and starts on a new line. And this is a kind of strange rule that I can't explain, but in this format, the period appears at the end of the sentence rather than at the end of the citation. So you'll notice that the paragraph 4 is in parentheses and it's outside of the sentence. And in the previous example, the period came after the parentheses. And we haven't done it in this example, but it's important to note that if you omit words, phrases, or sentences within a quote, you need to make sure you use the ellipses. All right, so we've looked at quotes. Now we're going to look at paraphrases. In this example, we're citing a paraphrase. We used an idea from the article we were citing, but we didn't use a word-for-word quote. We put the idea in our own words. We still need to include the author's last name as well as the year of publication, but with paraphrases, you don't have to cite the page or the paragraph. And you also don't need quotation marks because you're not quoting directly. Okay, let's look at an in-text citation for a summary. Like with the paraphrase, we still need to cite the author's last name and year of publication, but not the page number. So the summary and the paraphrases, their in-text citations should look similar. All right. Sometimes we encounter tricky sources, and these are sources that don't include the information we need to create an in-text citation, like the author's name, a date, or a page number. So how do we handle these sources? If there's no author listed, we use the first few relevant words in the title of the article or book in place of the author's last name. And then the title should be in quotation marks, and then you would follow it just like you would in the normal in-text citation with the year that the article or book was published, and then the page number on which you found the information. If there is no specific author listed, but the information comes from an organization or company's document or website, you can use the organization as the author. So for example, a study by the Food and Drug Administration or a quarterly earning report from a company like AT&T or Ford Motor Company or something like that, you would use the organization as the author. If no date is listed, we use the abbreviation ND, which means no date. Again, it should look, we have the example of the signal phrase, so according to Thomas, and then parentheses ND. And then if you're not using a signal phrase, we have in the parentheses last name Thomas and then no date. You do need the periods separating the N and the D. And then often page numbers are not available, and this is because we use online sources or we're using some other form of communication style. So if you're citing a quotation and it doesn't have page numbers, you can use paragraph numbers instead. So for example, if the quote was in the second paragraph, we would cite para 2. If we're citing a paraphrase or a summary, we don't need the page number, so we don't need to include anything. All right, now we're going to talk about the reference list, which is the third major element of an APA paper. We'll start by looking at formatting requirements. Every page in your paper needs a header. Remember, the header should look like the rest of the headers in the paper with the exception of the title page. So on your reference list, you won't have that running head. It will look like the rest of the paper. And then the page number flush right. References should be centered at the top of the page. It should not be in bold or underlined or in italics. And then sources should be listed alphabetically by author's last name. If an author has more than one work, organized by the date of publication. And then the reference list should be double spaced with no extra spaces between sources. Every line after the first line of each entry should be indented. This is called a hanging indent. I have another great video for you guys that you should bookmark that shows you how to do a hanging indent. This is a thing that a lot of students will get wrong. I've seen a lot of this in papers where they don't have the hanging indent. They have the first line of the reference indented instead of the second. And electronic sources should include clickable URLs. All right, let's take a closer look at the reference list. The first step in deciding how to cite a source is to decide what type of source you have. Is your source a book, a magazine, a newspaper article, a journal, website, personal interview, YouTube video, TED Talk, or some other form of print or electronic source? APA has specific rules for citing different kinds of sources. So each entry, regardless of the type of source, will contain the author's name if it's known, the title of the work, and publication information. But again, depending on the type of source that you're using, the type of information varies. So it's important to identify the type of source you have and then look for the example of how to cite that particular source. For this example, we're looking at a reference entry for a blog. However, if we were citing a book or an online newspaper or a video game, the citation would have a slightly different format. So notice that we've listed the author by last name and first initial. In this example, we have a single author, but your source may have multiple authors, no author or an organization as an author. The date in parentheses comes after the author. In this case, we're citing a blog, so we need the complete date, including the year, the month, and the day. For some other types of entries, you only need the year. So again, be sure to check examples for your specific type of source. And then also notice that only the first letter of the first word in the book or article title is capitalized. Every word that comes after the first word begins with a lowercase letter, except proper nouns. They're the exception. They are always capitalized. The other exception is anything that comes after a colon. You'll see in the example, it says focus on APA, colon, what needs to be cited, what is also capitalized. Notice that each line after the first line of the entry is indented. And for a blog citation, we have to note whether this is a web blog or a blog comment. We put that in brackets. And then again, for any electronic source, we need a URL. The words retrieved from are followed by the permalink to the source. All right, we've talked about basic reference list entries, but what if we don't know the author's name or the date of publication? So we're going to talk about these tricky reference list entries. For this example, let's pretend that the article we just referenced has no author listed. Notice that the title of the article moves to the front of the citation in place of the author's last name. And then let's pretend that the article we just referenced has no author listed, but we know that an organization, in this example, it would be the Full Sail Writing Center, published the article. The name of the organization goes in place of the author's last name. All right. And then in our next one, we're going to look at it's that there's no date listed. So just like with the in-text citation, we use the abbreviation ND for no date. This one actually is no author and no date. All right. So we've talked about how to cite ideas used in a paper. What if we need to cite media in a paper? For example, let's say we're in a photography class. Our instructor asked us to find a photograph online and discuss its composition. We aren't including the image in the paper, just referring to it. How do we cite that? If you're referring to a specific piece of media in your paper, then you need to cite it in APA style using both the in-text citation and the reference sheet. This is the sample citation for an image. So it's the artist's last name and the year that it was taken. And then in the reference list entry, it's the artist's last name, the first initial, the year, and then the title of the piece, the format, and then the retrieved from URL. All right, you also need to cite other media like videos, music, computer games, video games, movies, TV shows, if you refer to them in your paper. There are specific reference list entry formats for each of these types of sources. So what if you are using media in a visual presentation? For example, an image or video taken from the internet you wish to use in a PowerPoint or a keynote. If you are reproducing an image in your presentation, you need to follow these 3 steps in order to cite it correctly. Check the copyright license. Make sure the image is licensed for reuse under Creative Commons. And then include an image URL on each slide where the image appears in the presentation. If you look to the bottom left of this slide, you can see there is a URL here. It is extremely light and it is not prominently placed. But it is there. And so that's the important part, that on every slide that has any form of media that you've included the URL where you found this photo or picture or whatever it is that you're using. And then you have to include a reference slide in APA style at the end of the presentation. This is the reference slide for this presentation. Okay, let's talk about how to find images. There are a couple of different places that we can go to look for images. I am going to walk you through that right now. One place that you can go is CompFight. I can't type, sorry guys, today. Compfight.com, and I will give you this link in the chat log as well. So if you guys want to bookmark it, you can. This is a great place. You can search for, you can search using different photo license agreements. There are free graphics, HD video clips. So this can be a really good place to go to find graphics. And then they have a great frequently asked questions. So I would definitely suggest going here. And the other place that you can go that is really good is actually the library on Connect, and you can use databases there. I am not signed in, sorry about that. Okay, so if you sign into Connect, mine looks a little different because I'm under the Full Sail staff. But if you sign in, this is what it kind of looks like for you guys. And then you can search for the library. If you come down here, you can come to the databases. Now, if you look, we have the Oxford Art Online, which you can use, and then the AP Images Online. Both of these are good places to go, the AP Images collection. Full Sail has purchased licenses so that students can use these images. Again, it's on the library page on Connect under research databases. If you guys are not using this yet, you really should be. There are some really great resources here. Okie dokie. At this point, you're probably feeling a little overwhelmed by everything that I've told you. But here's the good news. You don't have to have a photographic memory to use APA, and you don't have to memorize all of these rules. I'm going to give you some tips, and you'll be well on your way to citing sources properly. So first, become familiar with the basic elements of an APA paper. That's what we were doing today. Pay attention to your instructor's requirements. Is APA required for the assignment, how many sources has your instructor asked for, and do you need to include an abstract? Always use an APA manual as a reference. They're available in the library, and you can also find a lot of great resources online, which I will share with you in just a minute. My favorite ones are the Purdue OWL. I'm gonna, oh, sorry. I am gonna take us there now. All right, so the Purdue OWL's APA section is really great. I'll give you guys a link. They cover both the paper format and also in-text citations and the reference list. So in-text citations, the basics. This is what it looks like here. It says, authors, footnotes, endnotes, reference list. It goes through. It is quite extensive. It's a really good resource to use. The other one that I love a lot is projectapa.info. Again, if I were you, I would bookmark this site. This was actually put together by Full Sail instructors, and they looked at the references that you guys tend to use the most. And some of the things that you guys use can be a little hard to find on your traditional APA sites. But you have in-text citations, and it breaks it down. Formats of quotation, paraphrase, and summary, works by multiple authors, works by unknown authors, works with no date, etc. How do you do an in-text citation for social media communications? That can be really helpful. And then the reference page, you can look for audiovisual media, blogs, websites, and social media, electronic books and print books, and then newspapers, magazines, and databases. You guys, I get a lot of questions from students about how to cite social media, blogs, websites, and then audiovisual media. So this website is just really wonderful. It breaks the information down really succinctly and cleanly, and it gives you examples that are easy to follow. So I would, again, definitely bookmark this page. I can't stress it enough. All right, so back to APA tips. Again, always use the manual or use an online APA resource. And then always check to see that formatting, in-text citations, and reference list entries match examples that appear in the manual or the online resources that you've used. And after you've created your entries, go back and check them to make sure that they match again. And then the final APA tip is, when in doubt about a documentation issue, ask your course instructor or make an appointment with the Writing Center. We're always here, and we can always help you guys out with that. For more information about the Writing Center, you can visit the Writing Center website on Connect. If you go to the search bar and you type in Writing Center, we will come up and you can just go there. And you can read more about APA, you can find out how we can help during appointments, and you can find out how to schedule appointments. Actually, I will take you guys there because it is a good page. So again, if you just type in the search bar for the Writing Center, you can come here. If you want an appointment, you can request an appointment by using this link right here. We have, here's a quick link to the blog. There's Writing Center frequently asked questions, online resources, videos, and then downloads, which can be really helpful. We've split it up for you based on the kind of the type of questions you might be asking. So APA help, here's a visual guide that you can download, and then a resource on how to number your pages. But again, I hope you guys use the Writing Center and make appointments with us, because we love it when that happens. The Writing Center also has open hours. It changes month to month, but we post them on the on our Connect page as well. All right, so I am going to open up the floor for questions. So if you have a question, you can type it into the chat or you can unmute yourself and ask it verbally. So take it away. Okay, so Lloyd is asking if online students can get appointments. Yes, you can 100% get appointments. What we do for online students is we schedule go-to-meeting sessions. So you would meet one-on-one with a tutor, and you would send them your work. If you, yeah, if you have questions that you think are going to be a little long, I would say definitely make an appointment. You can make an appointment by filling out that request form, or you can make an appointment by emailing the Writing Center. The Writing Center's email address is writingcenter@fullsail.com. And we would be happy to help you with anything you have questions about. Anything that relates to writing, we can help you guys with. You're very welcome, Lloyd. Anybody else have any questions? Stephen, he's asking, do you have to cite someone you overheard? I'm not sure in what situation you mean. But yes, you if you don't have for YouTube videos, if there's no author listed, you would use the username that's listed. I'm going to come back to Stephen for just a quick second because I feel like I did not answer your question. So if you are wanting to paraphrase like a lecture that you've listened to, yes, you would need to cite that. Or if you are wanting to cite like maybe a talk that you went to and you heard someone speaking at, you would also need to cite that. Again, you're going to cite anything that is not your own work or your own idea. The only exception to that is common knowledge. Um, Jessica, the signal phrase usually does come before the quote, simply because it's a cue to the reader that what is coming is a quote. You can be more creative with the wording. I don't know if there is a list of common signal phrases. My guess is if you go to the lovely internet, they can give you some ideas on that. Um, I would say think of anything like according to or in regards to or things of that nature. But again, I would, if you're looking for some common signal phrases, I would Google that. Is the Bible considered common knowledge? If you are quoting from the Bible, you need to cite it. Um, think about how big the world is and think about how many religions exist in the world. Not everyone is going to be very familiar with the more in-depth look at the Bible. So I would say just to be, there are things in the Bible that would probably be considered common knowledge, but just to be safe, if you're quoting or paraphrasing or summarizing from the Bible, yes, cite it. Anybody else have any other questions? Oh, yes, Alicia is asking about citing YouTube. I would go to projectapa.info. They have, actually, I can show it to you. I keep doing that. Okay. And then for your reference list, you would want to say, I think it's under audio visual. So an online video, real name and screen name, if you know both, you want to cite both. If you only know their screen name, you would just use the screen name. If you only know if their screen name is their real name, again, you would use both. Hope that helps. When doing the reference page on a PowerPoint, do you have to put the slide number for each reference or just list them in alphabetical order? List them in alphabetical order. You guys are welcome. These are some really great questions, you guys. I really appreciate you participating. Does anybody else have anything? Okay, what I am going to suggest then is if, okay, Lloyd, Lloyd is wondering about stock photos. What are you curious about with stock photos? All right, well, what I'm going to suggest right now is I will stay on here and I'll keep answering questions. Um, but maybe if Christine doesn't mind providing us with the survey link, we can do that for people whose questions have been answered.